Hey folks, we're back. I'm your host, BKP. Good morning from Sycamore Crossing and Blue Ridge. It's now time for North Georgia Senior Living with the Community Relations Director at Cameron Hall, Jessi Barton. Jessi, we have our delivery trucks. It's live.
I see that.
We'll just say plenty of beverages for the weekend coming in.
Plenty of adult beverages for the Labor Day weekend are being delivered behind us.
Okay, so we're going to power through, speak up a little bit. You know, what I want to talk about, and I have been dealing with something with both of my elderly parents here recently, and I stop and think what these, and I'm going to say, these, what word? Living facilities.
So I hate the word facility because it has a negative connotation to me.
It does, doesn't it?
So I prefer, it's all in the way you spin it. Remember, I'm a PR person. So, community.
Okay.
We live in a community.
So these community living centers, or
yes,
whatever, okay.
Sure, that works.
But I have recently thought, wow, this is difficult. This can be difficult because there's a lot to pay attention to that we don't think about that your staff and others are having to deal with. My mom and dad, I mean, when I say get personal, but my mom and dad are on an enormous amount of medications. There's several.
Sure.
They have a morning, noon, and evening, and I think, wow, this is a challenge getting it correct, getting it dispensed correctly.
Right.
It's got to be a big challenge, in places like where you're at and you work. And I think to myself, and then all of a sudden a doctor can call and say, take this out of the rotation, we're going to change this, we want to put this in. We need to get involved as children with our parents' care and pay attention to it. I mean, I don't know where I'm going. You know what I mean?
Well, and I think it goes back not just elder care. I think it's anybody, but we need to be involved. We need to be our person's advocate, especially in situations where they are receiving care in a setting, maybe a hospital. Don't just sit back and watch what they're doing. Get in there and understand what's happening. Be that advocate because, unfortunately, and this is a topic for another day, healthcare does boil down to what Medicare pays for.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's the way it is developed. But your wife shared a story with me, and the gentleman gave us permission to talk about it today. But he had to place his brother into an assisted living community. Unfortunately, there was a medication incident with that particular resident, and he did not receive his medication for a few days. So he's, promoting being an advocate for his family, going out there and being an advocate for your loved ones, and really paying attention to what these communities are doing. So I come at it with two approaches. I sympathize that situation happened. I will say that just because you have one bad situation doesn't mean that is a blanket for the industry. And not to, discredit his information. That would be a terrible thing. I would feel horrible if that happened with my family, and I would be advocating and getting in the face of that community, and I would probably be doing what they did and calling the state regulating agency. So on the flip side of that, being from the community standpoint, what I want to say is that I can speak for my community. I can't speak for the industry as a whole. Our community is regulated, and the industry is regulated by the State Department of Community Health. We have regulations in place that we have to follow to dispense medications to residents. We have to have the right training, and they have to be documented. They're listed on a state registry, the people that have been trained to dispense these medications. The second piece of that is residents can refuse to take their medication. So while we have these regulations to keep in place what we're doing and what we're tracking and safeguards, you have resident rights that oversee those regulations. So you can say, you know what, I don't want my medicine today. we can ask you again. But after we've asked you for 3 times and you've refused 3 times, we just, at that point it does become a resident right issue. And so the state is really big on those residents having those rights. So we have to document resident refused medication.
Right.
If they do that a couple of times, depending on, I'll speak for us, we're going to kind of give that family a heads up. So not all communities will. It's depending on their operations, their policies, procedures. But we're going to kind of say, hey, they're starting to refuse this medication. We may even contact the doctor and say, just a heads up, your patient is refusing. Not that we can do anything about that. So our system is we want to make sure you're getting your medications correctly, because if you're feeling well and you're doing well, you're going to be a happy, productive resident who is going to have a longer stay with us, and we can help you maintain a better quality of life. So what we do, we have an electronic system. So it's kind of like we scan a barcode underneath that scanner, pretend like the bike's a scanner today. So we scan that barcode underneath the scanner. It documents what time to the minute that the resident gets the medication. So we can go back and say, oh, you know what, they refused that day, but then they took their evening dose. Or, you know what, it shows that we got both medication doses. Our staff has high integrity, so they're not just scanning it and dumping the medicine. People fear that happens. They're going to give the medication to the resident. They're usually scanning it right when the resident's standing there with them. So there are safeguards in place. So from the community standpoint, I will say that we try to, ensure that medications are given correctly and the errors are not happening, because we actually have to report those errors to the state if that happens.
Let me say this, because this is a very interesting subject. This is a fine line. Just because you move into an assisted living doesn't mean you give up all your rights.
You give up, yeah.
Right, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you're in an
3
assisted
pages
living,
of rights.
Right? You still have rights. So if somebody comes by and says, here's your morning meds, and you say, not taking them, well, they still have those rights.
Absolutely.
But you have the documentation you have to do, and that happens. And I will tell you this, my dad, I go there, my dad is, if it's time to take medicine, he takes all of his medicine and does it. My mom, no. Okay? Now, I'm not going to say she's difficult, but Mom, that's one of the morning pills, and it's still right there. I'm not taking that.
Yeah.
Mom, no, you're going to take. I'm not taking that one. That one bothers me. That's what makes me sick in the afternoon. Like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So we know, and I don't want to say that happens, but that doesn't make, and that's why I think, and we like to do the segment, and I'm going to be very candid with you. If I looked at the camera and I was asking people to contact you, but I didn't feel that comfort, I wouldn't do it another day. And I want I wouldn't. I
know.
But I know when I tell people to contact you, because they do need to have somebody to work with. They do need to, at this time, when there are things going on with mom and dad, they do need a person they can communicate with. And I really suggest get in touch with Jessi Barton here, Community Relations Director for Cameron Hall and LJ, because we hear a bad story and then it seems to rumble into like the industry.
It does. At which, shed some light on it. Let's make sure, as somebody, if you're trusting me to care for your parents, then I want to make sure that I'm safeguarding your parent. I want to make sure that I'm doing the job that I'm supposed to, because, and maybe that's my personal integrity, but I don't want you to come back and say, you know what, your folks didn't do what you said that they were going to do, and now, my loved one is in the hospital because they didn't get their medication. I don't want that on my shoulders. I don't want to lay my head down at night and say, oh, no worries. They'll be okay.
And that in itself, when, that in itself, medication and dispensing medication, if somebody refuses it, you guys go through all of the documentation necessary by law to document they refused it, where the medicine's going. It's medicine that was not taken.
Right.
And you have to go through. You just explained that whole list.
Right. The other thing that people think about assisted livings, we are not licensed as a medical facility. So
right.
If you come to me and say, hey, I've got a headache, I really would like some Tylenol, if it is not listed in your medication record that the doctor said you can have that, I can't give you that. So we can't give you anything over the counter, vitamins included, if your doctor does not prescribe it. The other side of that is a lot of times people will feel like places like assisted livings and memory cares will tend to over-medicate their residents so they don't have to deal with them. We don't have that ability. Everything we do has to be documented by the physician. The physician has to send in new orders if he changes the medication. So we're really trying to safeguard, and we even partner with a local pharmacy to destruct the narcotics that get discontinued. So
they will put a list, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but they will put a list out. The prescription says just X. Take it this time. Take it this time. Take it this time. Right. So they'll put that out, but they also, the doctors will say as needed. They will send a list as needed, but put on the approved sheet.
So when they send in an as needed, they have to put up to how many times a day can that happen, not to exceed X amount. So if you're coming to me every few minutes wanting a Tylenol, there is a limit that the doctor has set. So, and I definitely sympathize with Lisa's friend's family, because that is a horrible situation, and I won't say that it doesn't happen in our industry. Unfortunately, we do know that it can happen. So definitely get in there and find out what the community does in those circumstances. If a resident refuses, or ask if they've had any medication errors. Ask these things up front. Get involved.
Absolutely. Hey, I'm your host, BKP, and this is Jessi Barton, Community Relations Director. Jessi Barton, Community Relations Director, Cameron Hall. Did I get all that right? I'm just a lot I got going on.
And there's so much going on.
Yes. So, hey, find us on YouTube, FYN TV, Fetcher News, and find this in the playlist right here, North Georgia Senior Living. And I recommend calling this lady here. If you have any questions, tell them how to get in touch with you, Jessi.
Sure. Call me at Cameron Hall down in LJ at 706-515-4100, or find us on the web at CameronHallofLJ.com.
Little background noise, but we never know here because it's a live show and the delivery trucks are here for Labor Day weekend, making sure there's plenty of refreshments. But we're going to round out the show with our Pet of the Week just in a couple minutes from the Humane Society of Blue Ridge.